Now, multiple people are feared dead after a massive vehicle charged through a crowd of partygoers in New Orleans in the early hours of this morning. Well, emergency services have said at least 10 people have been killed after a vehicle struck a crowd celebrating the New Year. The incident happened at around 3:15 a.m. on New Year's Day in the United States. The number of injured survivors is still unknown. This is a story that is, of course, developing. We're going to keep tabs on it throughout the programme. But joining me now is the retired Scotland Yard detective, Mike Neville. Mike, this is such a shock, a tragedy, but also, strangely, I think something that perhaps people have become a little numb to, given we saw a very similar event in Germany just a few days ago.
Yes, it's absolutely tragic, Tom, isn't it? And people out celebrating in crowds and these vehicles being turned into weapons. And the reports are, wild. There's also talk of a man getting out with an assault rifle who had a flak jacket on. It's unclear whether anybody's been arrested yet and whether the suspect has been detained. And one of the lessons, I think, from Germany, really, is that the German police were quick to get out information, who the man was, where he was, the information they had. And that was very much at variance with the experience we had in the United Kingdom with the Southport attacks, where the authorities sort of sat on the truth for months and months. And I just think that causes massive amounts of speculation, real fear amongst communities. And I think the American police need to look to the German police about getting information out so the public are assured. But these are terrible things. And Douglas Murray, writing recently, has said that this becomes almost an annual event, something that we expect. And it is a terrible thing that in the West that we are, but people cannot feel safe when they should be having a lovely party.
No, it is a real shocking event. And of course, our thoughts and hearts go out to everyone affected. Some of the images that we've been seeing are truly, truly horrific. But Mike, how does a police service go about trying to keep people safe? Is it possible in the 21st century to keep large events, large celebrations like we've seen in cities the world over? Is it possible to deliver the sort of level of safety that perhaps we would have expected several decades ago?
Well, I think that what we're going to look at now is we live in a very different world. You only have to walk around London and you go over London Bridge and you see the vehicle barriers and the like. One of the flaws out in Germany was that one of the barriers was missing. And so we've got to accept that if we're going to have large, crowded events, those events have absolutely got to be secured, almost with tank traps that people cannot get in there with a vehicle. Because, yes, it'd be very difficult. Somebody could slip in with a pistol or a knife. But vehicles can be stopped. And we know that in events where you can put up those big barriers, that will happen. And I think we've just got to accept that we live in a very evil and wicked world, really. And these things can happen. We've got to expect them. And it's not just the police, of course. It'll be the local authority, the mayor, the people who are responsible for that area. All of them have got to work together to make sure that a crowded area cannot be attacked by vehicles like this.
It is particularly shocking, given we've seen the death toll now reach double figures. It's clearly one of the more significant attacks that America has seen in recent years. What do you think the repercussions to this might be?
Well, I think the Americans, because they until 9/11, of course, things like the IRA were not taken too seriously. Then terrorism came home. People realised in the States how awful the West, and particularly Britain, had suffered from terrorist attacks. And I think it will just, the Five Eyes is the security services of the major nations, the Western nations like Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand, and America. They'll all be working together to see who this person is. But the key thing for me is to learn how to deal with the public. And too much in the past, the public have almost been lied to. They've been told it's a Norwegian terrorist or somebody who's mentally ill or whatever else. Let's get the truth out there. Let's establish who this person is. And then the public can help to provide information, and we can try and stop the people who do this. Because one of the things I would say is that the counter-terrorism unit at Scotland Yard and beyond, they stop so many of these incidents ever happening in the first place. These are highly professional officers who never get praised because we never knew that the thing never happened. And so congratulations to them. But the trouble is like the IRA said, we have to be lucky every time. They only have to be lucky once.
It's a profound point. Well, Mike, I think you raised some really, really important points there. Openness, transparency. We will, of course, be crossing back to New Orleans. We're expecting some sort of statement from the authorities during the course of this programme. But for now, Mike Neville, retired Scotland Yard detective, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Well, joining me in the studio today, my panel, the editor-at-large at the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths, and the former Labour advisor, Matthew Larzer. Charlotte, I think we're all hoping to have a bit of a more jolly start to the show than all of this. Really terrible scenes in America.
Yeah, what really touched me is when he said this is an annual event, and it's so true, isn't it? Because now, every year we have Christmas, and then or New Year, and then a horrible thing happens. And that really struck a chord with me. And it's true, we are getting used to stuff like this. And it's just a really actually miserable start to 2025.
Yeah, no, Matthew.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. What a horrible start to the year. But I mean, as Mike was saying, it's interesting about preventative measures that are being taken. I just noticed on the way here that there were a lot more barriers up. Going past some government buildings, they were interestingly sort of on the corner of one government building. There was, it's obviously been identified as a weak point. So there aren't barriers all the way along, but it's a sort of corner section, and there's a new barrier that's just gone across there. And I live very close to the where the fireworks were, and certainly last night there were massively more barriers than there have been in previous years on a lot more streets. So clearly the threat from somebody driving a vehicle into a crowd has been taken very seriously.
Absolutely. It's one of these things where whether it's bombs or assault rifles or anything like that, the authorities can, of course, clamp down on those, and they can stop people accessing these weapons. But no one can stop people having a car, and it just gets to the point. It's like the stabbings that we see in London as well. I mean, you can't stop people having knives. These are useful tools, but then evil people turn everyday tools into weapons.
Yeah, and I think in America as well, you can't really bollard everywhere. What's lucky about London, as you were saying, is, of course, it's a very historic city, so there's lots of small, cobbly roads. I don't know how they're going to bollard these huge roads in America. And, what's sad is that everyday items can be turned into weapons, and you can't really guard against that, except to hopefully reprogram people's minds and hope, to be more peaceful.
Yes, it is sad that, and it's not just London, it's cities across the UK where you've got concrete blocks that are just in front of many of these areas where people congregate. And I wonder if that is going to be proliferated the world over. You'd expect it in New York, you'd expect it perhaps in Los Angeles. I wouldn't have thought that New Orleans would be one of the major flashpoints.
No, it's not it's no sort of political or commercial centre in quite the same way. It's a party town. So, I mean, I think the other issue is that people always find out the weak spots. So, as we saw in Germany, this wasn't in Berlin, this wasn't in Cologne. This was in a much smaller city, and I wonder if the issue here is that obviously police tackle London, Manchester, Glasgow, but smaller towns and cities are going to have to take this into account in a way you'd never have dreamt. The sort of market towns having a Christmas market or the Christmas light switch on or something. We'd have to start thinking about how do we bollard off a car access. I mean, it's pretty grim, isn't it?
Yeah, it wasn't Munich and it wasn't Berlin that got attacked in Germany, but I must say we are hearing now reports that it was a truck. That's the word that the Reuters news agency is using. A truck crashing in to a crowded street of partygoers. I mean, really quite horrific. It's easy to see how such a large and heavy vehicle.
Yeah, and also, of course, I mean, if it's a commercial vehicle, sometimes they have access in a way that cars don't because, people can, obviously have to unload, goods from those trucks. So if people are starting to use trucks, then which in some ways can get closer in if they've got the right pass or they say the right thing to the guy with the clipboard, then that's very worrying.
Gosh, I mean, these American vehicles are huge, even their SUVs. I mean, there was some talk that this was an SUV, which is also a truck in America, but anyway. But they're huge, these American vehicles. They're ginormous people carriers, half of them. So I dread to think what it was like seeing the bodies flying around. Sad about it.
I know there's some footage that's been flying around on social media. We're choosing not to show that here on GB News, but these are live pictures currently in New Orleans we've been looking at over the last few minutes that we've been able to see the police response there. And we're expecting likely some sort of statement from the authorities there over the course of the next hour or two. Matthew, you've worked with some of the most senior politicians in the country. Would we expect a political response to this as well as a police statement?
Yeah, I think what we'll see in America is a series of political responses, because obviously we'll see them in the state. We'll see the governor of Louisiana at some point make a statement. But then obviously this is at the very end of the Biden presidency. So, it's quite possible that the president himself would visit. I mean, of course, one of the big things in America is, politicians like to be seen at church services that are often held. Louisiana has a very large African-American community, there'll be, which it's traditionally, although the state isn't, New Orleans is a sort of Democrat bastion. So, I wouldn't be surprised if we see Biden going down and doing actually what he does best, which is just empathising with people. And it's one of the things he actually, whatever else one thinks of him, that he can feel their pain. And sadly, there's a great deal of pain in that city tonight.
Goodness.